Good morning, everyone. Can I have everyone's attention? All right, good morning. Good morning. All right, I was beginning to think we don't have strong enough of coffee, but we're so glad that you can all make it and join us here on this rainy day. My name is Brahima Coulibaly. I'm the Vice President of the Global Economy and Development Program. It gives me really great pleasure to welcome you to Brookings for the Education Systems Transformation Symposium. As the Center for Universal Education, or CUE, under the leadership of Rebecca Winthrop and Jennifer O'Donoghue, celebrates the 20th anniversary and launches its new 10-year strategy focusing on systems transformation. We are thrilled that you, our invaluable partners, could join us today. We know that young people face complex challenges that require an evolving set of competencies, from literacy to numeracy to critical thinking, creative and collaborative problem solving. Across the globe, the climate crisis, increasing levels of conflict and displacement, the diverse social and economic effects of the global pandemic intersects with historical injustices such as gender-based violence and discrimination and economic inequality, making it critical that all children and youth have access to inclusive, holistic learning that prepares them not only to navigate these challenges, but to be agents of positive change in their own lives, in their communities, and on the global stage. Yet, the great majority of education systems around the world do little to support this type of learning, especially for children and youth living in the most marginalized context. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought critical attention to education, putting the dramatic inequities in learning that have only grown in the past 3 years on the global public agenda to an extent rarely seen before, as evidenced by the UN Secretary General's call for a Transforming Education Summit last September. So more than ever, young people today need education systems that support their engagement with each other, their social emotional well-being, and the inclusive and equitable development of a breadth of skills. For the past 20 years, CUE, dedicated to building a significant body of evidence, a vast reservoir of tools, and a rich network of global partners, has cohered around a central theme. Education leaders must work collaboratively with actors across education systems at the local, regional, and global levels to transform educational systems. So today is an exciting day as it marks the official launch of the new strategy for CUE, one in which they will do just that, seeking to build an innovative, collaborative research to practice network of actors across education ecosystems and across the globe, around the shared goal of transforming education systems. We welcome all of you to this day of connection, of shared learning about education system transformation, what it could be, where it's happening, where it's not, and most importantly, how can we get there together? So it's now my great pleasure to welcome Rebecca Winthrop, Senior Fellow and Director of CUE, whose extraordinary leadership has brought the center to this important milestone. So Rebecca, the podium is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Our in-house audience, and welcome to our online audience. Thank you for joining us so much. We have a great, I'm going to tell you a little bit what our plan of action is today. And I think we got the slides. Our plan of action for today, this morning, I'm going to kick off, and I'm going to tell you, as Cool said, a little bit about our new direction as we're celebrating our 20th anniversary, where we're heading in the next 10 years. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we're thinking about system transformation. System transformation, everyone's talking about it. What does it actually mean? And then I'm going to hand over to wonderful colleagues, and you have their full bios in the program that you received, so I'm not going to take the time to walk through them, and please do peruse. I'm going to hand over to my colleagues Amanda Datnow, who's a professor at UC San Diego, and Dawn Peruk, who's a professor at University of Michigan. Together, we have done a study with many other co-authors around the globe looking at the reform journeys of jurisdictions that have gone on a transformation exploration and the lessons learned from that. And then we will hand over to Commissioner Adefaseo, who is the Education Commissioner of Lagos State in Nigeria, to bring her perspective as she's trying to do transformation in her jurisdiction and what it means. And then we will take a break, and our online audience will leave, and we'll have discussion around the tables. And because we don't have a formal Q&A session for all of you, please join in the discussion online, especially our online audience at #TransformEDU. And of course, those of you here, please join in too. I have just posted right prior to this on LinkedIn and Twitter, if anyone still uses Twitter, links of all the various reports that we'll be talking about this morning. And then you will be followed by parallel sessions, various coffee breaks, parallel sessions in the morning, lunch, parallel sessions, and then come back together at the end of the day at 4 o'clock for a plenary. So that is our master plan. And before I jump in, I really do want to give a very heartfelt thank you. I see many, many old friends in the audience. I see many new friends. I just want to give a heartfelt thank you to all of you, to all of our partners around the world. We work with all of you very closely. We learn from you. We have learned from you a huge amount over the last more than a decade that I've been here at the center. We're incredibly grateful. I also want to give a big shout out to our funding partners, whose very generous support means we can actually do this work. And I want to give a particular shout out to cross-center supporters, Echidna Giving, BHP Foundation, and the Lego Foundation, who just recently gave a very historic grant we're incredibly excited about to fund key parts of our new strategy. So thank you very much to all of you. And then, of course, last but not least, I want to thank our team, from myself and from Jennifer O'Donoghue, my right hand in running the center, who's the deputy director. Huge thanks to CUE. If can see anybody who's wearing a little blue lapel, and some of you may be surprised to hear this, and you have a blue lapel, but people will ask you questions. So please, if you have questions, where to go, what to do, how to access the Wi-Fi, where are the bathrooms, we're here to serve. So if CUE members, I don't think anyone's sitting, we do have an oversubscribed house. They're at the back. CUE members, please do stand up in your various rooms. I do believe we have a couple of overflow rooms because we're oversubscribed, so CUE members, please do stand up and wave. Thank you to the team for getting this whole thing together. And before I dive in, I wanted to give one big, huge shout out. One person over and above everybody, Sarah Osborne, our center manager, has really made this event happen. She's probably running around printing things as we speak. All right, so let's dive in. What is our new focus moving forward? So before I talk through what that is, I just wanted to share with you what we did to get there. We looked at our strengths, what have we done well? We looked at our weaknesses, what we'll do better. We had the great benefit of being supported to do an external evaluation, which is rare in think tank world, and that was incredibly formative for us. We looked at the landscape, who are our peers, and we looked at the needs of the field. And we basically decided that some things we'll stick with and some things we will pivot and evolve. And our three sort of major focus areas that underlie the strategy. One is we're going to double down. We're not going to change our focus on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. For those of you who don't know what the SDGs are, some American folks who work in domestic ed may not. They're an incredibly important North Star for the globe. And SDG 4 in education is ambitious, it is lofty, and there is a big debate at the moment, post-COVID, to say, should we abandon the Sustainable Development Goals? Because let's just admit they're too lofty. It's going to be too hard to reach. We should just double down on recovery. There's a big debate around let's double down on foundational literacy and numeracy, which is a huge issue and makes total sense. But we have decided that is not the right way to go. And not because we don't think it's absolutely essential that young people recover their lost learning time and learn how to read and write. It absolutely is. But because we've learned from so many past experiences that if you try to bring a goal down to less than what you actually want to achieve, even if you're saying this is the base, this is the starting point, the whole system orients around just achieving that. And rather than being a floor upon which you build, it becomes a ceiling upon which you don't go any higher. And so for us, we are really committed to this idea of keeping a North Star, making sure systems have in their mind this vision of opportunities and competencies and skills that young people can become, to allow young people to become lifelong learners. So that is really important to us. For those who are interested in this work of the SDGs, the Secretary General has talked about the importance of rescuing the SDGs, the UN Secretary General, and in September, there's a special summit on the SDGs in New York during the UN General Assembly week, because it is the midpoint of the SDGs, and the entire conversation will be around let's keep our aspirations high and instead figure out what we really need to do differently to try to meet them. Which gets me to our second focus for our strategy, which is on system transformation. And we have a couple of reasons for focusing on this. Basically, the reason I just said, that we actually do need to do deep transformation if we're going to meet these goals by any measure of what would be a moral time horizon. It's not moral, in my opinion, to say kids can have a high-quality education in 50 years in communities that don't have it. And we also have realized we've been doing lots of work on systems transformation, but not calling it that for many years on different dimensions. I'll give a shout out to my colleagues who run our scaling work, who have for years been looking at how do you scale and sustain impact over time, and not necessarily scale an organization from small to big, because scaling impact over time requires systemic shifts. We also, another reason, focusing on systems transformation is we know that if you want to have any change at scale, you need to work with systems. But for us, what we're doing internally is bringing all of our different portfolios under this umbrella of systems transformation. And really, the reason we're doing that is because we got feedback from all of our partners. We work with about 100 partners across 40 different countries, government, civil society organizations, parent networks, teacher organizations, business, global institutions. And in our external evaluation, we got great marks saying CUE is a trusted, collaborative partner. We really value working with you, but you, CUE, do not invite us in to your whole center's work. You keep us pigeonholed with the project we work in. The people working on gender transformative systems only work with gender transformative systems and don't get connected with the people working on scaling or climate resilience or assessment or teaching and learning or innovative pedagogy, et cetera. And so for us, that was a real message. We hadn't quite realized it, and we are going to do better. That's one of the things we endeavor to do, to really make sure that we partner better and more holistically. The third thing, in vein with that, which is a big focus for our new work over the next decade, is to do more co-creation with colleagues on the ground, particularly civil society organizations. We are doing quite a bit of this already, but we want to evolve it and really co-create, not just on our specific project areas, but co-create our agendas. And we're going to tell you more about that. And part of where this came from was not only our feedback, as I just explained, from our partners, but also the realization that as a global institution that has a platform, we do have we have to think about power dynamics. And I'll point you to a piece called Shared Priorities to Transform Education Systems, Mapping Recovery and Transformation Agendas, where we looked at sort of the debates around the Transforming Ed Summit. And one of the things that came out was that people inside the systems, students, teachers, school leaders, even governments in many countries felt that they were not equally and civil society organizations who work with them, local civil society organizations, felt they weren't equally at the table on the transformation discussion. So we're trying to do our part in trying to address that. What would that look like in practice? We are going to launch, and you're going to hear more about it, and Cool mentioned it, a Knowing Doing Network for Education Systems Transformation. For those of you who know your network theory, this is a movement network, so it's a network of networks. So bringing together the range of different networks who are working on different pieces of the system transformation agenda under one umbrella to do collective knowledge building and ecosystem strengthening to advance systems transformation. And we will be looking for, and at 4 o'clock, this is my, come back, don't just stay in the coffee hall at 4. Once you've all met your incredible colleagues and you just want to talk to each other, come back at 4 for the closing plenary. You're going to hear more because we are looking for 10 organizations, civil society organizations around the globe to partner with us to lead this network. And we're going to share with you that call for partners. So with that, that's sort of where we're heading. But it does beg the question, what is systems transformation? So this is a term that is much used. This is an approach that has been much used in many other sectors besides education. Systems is not a new concept. People have been working on systems strengthening for many, many decades in education. And I think what we want to do is share with you, alongside many other people who are getting into this discussion, our version of what is sort of at the highest level, simplest terms we mean by systems transformation. And so we offer it to you as a point of discussion and a jumping off point, and we offer it alongside other people in the sector who have been exploring this. I want to give also point you to the RISE program, who's done 8 years of work on systems, particularly on literacy and numeracy in low and middle income countries, has just put out a new MOOC, sort of capping off their work as they close. I want to point you to a new book come out by NORAG, Systems Thinking in International Education, which looks at systems transformation in sort of the international development space on education. And I want to point you to OECD's Governing Complex Education Systems work, which has been around for a little while and is very, very relevant. And I would say at its core, when we talk about systems transformation at the sort of most base level, what we're talking about is moving away from just relying on effectiveness evidence, or sort of this idea of what works. So, if in one context we know that training teachers on how to make education more relevant is really effective for stemming the tide of students who leave school in secondary school, that only really works in a new context if that is the same reason why kids are leaving school. You have to understand in that new context, why would they be leaving school in the first place? And what is the system doing to help them, to not allow them to stay? Because there could be many, many reasons. And the other piece that's really crucially important for thinking about systems transformation for us is leveraging sort of this long literature, decades of work in other sectors on systems thinking. And what do we mean by systems thinking? Here are a few tenets that we think are important. First is this idea of drawing a boundary around a system that is beyond the formal education institutions, beyond just schools and district leaders and line ministers and ministers of education, but drawing a larger boundary around systems that include families and communities and the private sector and civil society and a wide range of actors that actually shape how systems operate. And to also note another sort of key tenet and principle is to note that education systems are open and active and live. They're not closed, fixed systems. Their boundaries are very permeable. Many things impact them. We have some hot debates here inside our team, and we have some team members who say, you know, I think people think that, you know, education systems shape the environment we're in, and I think from what I'm looking at my research, I think the environment actually shapes the education system more. So the other piece that is actually absolutely crucial is this idea of interactionism, that systems deliver what they deliver because of the relationships between the different elements in a system. And understanding those relationships is essential. It's also essential to understand that those elements in a system are not just the visible elements. There's also invisible elements. Some people call this hard versus soft elements. So, you know, a concrete or visible element would be people and resources that you might have to think about shifting the relationships. But a soft or invisible element are things like beliefs and culture. And lastly, this principle of homeostasis, that systems, through all sorts of everyday routines, mindsets, existing power dynamics, habits, have a way of staying the same. And that is just a tenet of a system. Now, all of this doesn't tell you how to doesn't necessarily transform a system. This just tells you how systems work, and you have to understand that if you want to transform. This can you can look at these principles, and it can drive towards keeping the system the same and status quo. If you want to transform, our job is to really shift the elements and how they relate to each other, so you'll get a different outcome. And that is really hard. It is hard work. It is long work. It is not an easy fix. So we have put out, and we're just offering this up to you, a framework that is a high-level sort of, you know, well, what do I do with all this? When I go back to the office, do I sit and think about homeostasis and interactionism and get a headache and then go home? And the framework comes, oops, I missed this, sorry. This is just teeing up the framework. One of the things we want to make sure to underline is the power of the invisible elements. I think most of you have probably seen this iceberg graphic. It is everywhere for many, many different things. I like it because it's incredibly simple. It does distill a lot of systems thinking in a very simple way. So the tip, above the water in the iceberg is events, and that's what people react to. Below are patterns of behavior, and that's when you're doing trend setting, you're looking at trends. Below that is system structure, and you're really thinking about systems design, but you probably won't truly transform systems if you don't get all the way to the bottom on mental models and really shift mental models, sort of beliefs of what and assumptions underlying the system. And so we have developed sort of this framework that is hopefully provides some practical steps on what you could do to try to advance systems transformation. It is not the end-all and be-all, but hopefully a good starting point for discussion. It was developed together with the Ministry of Education of Sierra Leone, and we call it a participatory approach to education systems transformation. It's a 3P model. I'll go through the 3 Ps. The first one is around purpose. That one thing that is incredibly important, and this gets right at the bottom of the iceberg around mental models, is to try to get on the same page with everybody in the system. So it's not enough just your teachers and your district leaders. You've got to get families and students and community members all on the same page about what is the purpose of your education system. And here I would like to say that I think there's quite a bit of confusion around what is and actually what serves as a purpose for education. Some folks say literacy and numeracy, that's what we're going to focus on for our systems transformation. Literacy and numeracy, critical thinking, collaborative problem solving, what have you, are skills and outcomes of an education system. They are not a purpose. You can have literacy and numeracy, let's take that as the example, in service of many different purposes. If you think back many years, mid-1700s, to Prussia, where the first idea of having a public, accessible, universal education system came out, they said, we want everyone to be literate and numerate so we can have a stronger military and stop being, hurt in the wars. And that is a national security purpose for literacy and numeracy. If you take Brazil, I see Claudia here, Paulo Freire, a famous progressive educator, who said literacy and numeracy is absolutely important for liberation. Naming the world in your own words is liberatory for oppressed people. That was his way of looking at a purpose. Many of us would say that literacy and numeracy is essential for jobs. That's an economic purpose. So there are, and those are three very different ways to teach literacy and numeracy. I will tell you that the way we're teaching literacy and numeracy in my kids' school is nothing like how Paulo Freire taught literacy and numeracy in the fields of Brazil. So you really do have to understand sort of the purposes of education. And I point you to a piece by my colleagues Emily Morris and Omar Karga, which just got posted on the various purposes of education that you could think through. The next one sort of step is to really think about the pedagogical core, and that is the relationship between learners, educators, content and resources, and how those relationships work. It's not enough to shift content and expect that something different will happen if you don't shift how that content interacts with learners and educators, et cetera. And the reason we put this here is because so much education reform over the years stays at a very high policy level and actually doesn't change the pedagogical core. And then people say, well, education systems is impossible. It's just give up. It's too hard. Nothing changes. Well, you're going about it the wrong way is what we would argue. You really have to think about redesigning the pedagogical core to figure out what needs to shift to get to that purpose of education that you've identified. And then lastly, again, it sounds easy on a slide deck, but incredibly hard. Align all the different components of your education system, position them behind that redesign of the pedagogical core. So those are what we offer to you as food for thought as we move forward. We are excited for critiques and new ideas and feedback. We would never say that this is sort of our last word on systems transformation. We are embarking on a journey. We invite all of you to work with us, and we are really excited to learn from you as we go through our next decade. And with that, I want to say thank you very much. And I want to invite up Amanda and Dawn, who have done some deep work on what do systems do when they shift their purpose to well-being, to sort of child well-being from just learning.
Good morning. I'm Don Purok. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Amanda Datnow from the University of California, San Diego. We'll be discussing a report that we prepared with our colleagues, Vicki Park from San Diego State University and Jim Spillane from Northwestern University, on transforming education systems to support holistic student development. The report summarizes case studies on system building and system rebuilding prepared by an amazing group of colleagues around the world. Juan Bravo, Whitney Hegseth, Jean Ho, Davey Kana, Dennis Queck, Angela Lyle, Amelia Peterson, Tom Walsh, Jose Weinstein, and Huiming Wang. Our collective work is organized around a central empirical question. Is there evidence that it's possible to rebuild academically focused education systems to support holistic student development? And appreciating this question requires understanding the vision of educational transformation that sits behind our work. And for that, I'd like you to consider the difference between transformation as recreation and transformation as maturation. Now, a lot of people think of transformation in terms of recreation. This view typically begins with a critique of the status quo in education as broken or as ill-suited or as somehow not up to the task. And the matter at hand is recreating education systems that are fundamentally different and that serve different, more current purposes. By contrast, we think of transformation in terms of maturation. This view begins with respecting and appreciating everything that people are doing and striving to do to support the development of students, all the way from classrooms up to national ministries. And the matter at hand is recognizing the need to develop fundamentally new capabilities to do even more to support the development of even more students. So think about the maturation of a child into an adolescent and then into a young adult. At each stage, the maturation lies in preserving and sustaining all that's good, addressing some things that need work, while at the same time becoming even more. With each turn, the child's transformed, becomes somebody who's still recognizable, yet somehow fundamentally different, more fully realized. That's the understanding that we bring to our work on educational transformation. We focus specifically on a three-stage developmental progression for building and rebuilding systems. This begins with the development of school systems with capabilities to organize and manage access to schooling for more and more diverse students. It continues with the maturation of school systems into education systems that also organize and manage the day-to-day work of instruction, teaching and learning in the pedagogical core to ensure quality and equity in students' academic development. And it continues further with the maturation of education systems to support the holistic development of students. That is, their intellectual, emotional, social, moral, cultural, physical development. Now, as you know, over the past decade, there's growing attention in education policy, research, and practice to developing a wider breadth of skills in students that include but also transcend academic achievement in core content areas. This attention amplified during the pandemic. It continues to amplify. For example, education scholars argue for an integration of learning and well-being, for conceptualizing cognitive, socio-emotional, and identity development as not independent constructs, but as overlapping constructs. And for recognizing that fostering students' positive identity development also requires honoring their diverse cultural repertoires. Now, these presses for advancing access, academic quality, holistic student development have emerged and accumulated historically, as Rebecca just pointed out, in many developed countries. And they're currently being experienced simultaneously in many developing countries. But all of this is very much a work in progress, even in developed countries. Many are working hard to mature beyond access-oriented school systems to academically focused education systems, never mind developing further capabilities to support holistic student development. And that brings us all the way back to the empirical question that drives our work. Is there evidence that it's even possible to rebuild academically focused education systems to support holistic student development? Now, to explore this question, our colleagues produced case studies of 7 diverse initiatives aimed at building and rebuilding systems for holistic student development. They include national initiatives in Singapore, Ireland, and Chile, provincial, territorial, and local initiatives in British Columbia, in India with the happiness curriculum, and in the US with Iowa Big, and they include one cross-national initiative, the International Baccalaureate. These 7 cases are at different points in their reform journeys. Some launched over a decade ago, some are just getting off the ground. They're different in many ways, but each is working in policy contexts that are pressing for academic quality and equity while also amplifying the press to support holistic student development. And that, in turn, has each of these systems imbuing their work not only with technical value aimed at amplifying students' academic development, but with moral values. So as these systems build and rebuild themselves to support holistic student development, our cross-case analysis suggests that they're focusing on three general domains. The first is self and well-being, including cultivating students' socio-emotional skills, mindfulness, confidence, and positive identity. The second is orientation to others and community, including cultivating social responsibility, empathy, and intercultural understandings. The third is learning dispositions, including cultivating critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. But none of these systems is focusing on all three. Different systems are prioritizing different domains. For example, in Chile, in India, the focus is squarely on socio-emotional well-being as key domains of holistic student development. By contrast, Ireland is foregrounding student agency. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Amanda. She's going to tell you what we learned, and one of the things that she's going to tell you is that we learned that developing systems for holistic student development looks very much like the work of developing systems to support students' academic development.
We found that education system rebuilding involves 10 key lessons across three core domains depicted here. In the first domain, systems work on managing their environments to build support for holistic student development among diverse stakeholders, construct coherence within their systems, and address perceived tensions between equity, rigor, and holistic development. In the second domain, systems build or rebuild a social infrastructure, develop instructional designs, and design an infrastructure that supports holistic development in schools and classrooms. In the third domain, systems work at integrating educational infrastructure with everyday practice in schools by balancing common conventions and local discussion, distributing leadership and supporting professional learning, and managing performance and continuous improvement. What the spiral is intended to show is that the domains of system rebuilding work are interrelated and overlapping as institutional environments are in constant flux. Further, the work in one domain, in different domains, does not happen in any particular order. Although managing environments is important early in a reform journey, it also remains crucial later on. We'll highlight an example from each of the domains. Among the first move each system made in their efforts was to cultivate engagement with a broader and more diverse group of partners. The happiness curriculum in Delhi is one example of this. Delhi's journey towards holistic student development began in 2017 with the development of the happiness curriculum as a complement to a long-standing content-based national curriculum. Led by the Ministry of Delhi in collaboration with 5 NGOs referred to as knowledge partners, the aim was to develop a scalable socio-emotional learning program that was responsive not only to the needs of Delhi's diverse students, but also to global conversations about the need to advance student well-being. Implementation of the happiness curriculum was launched throughout Delhi in 2018 as a mandatory standalone curriculum for nursery to grade 8 across all 1,024 government-run schools. The curriculum is mandated for 35 to 45 minutes per day. Supporting implementation required overcoming resistance and building support among teachers, building extensive supports for curriculum at scale, and developing capabilities for continuously improving it. It's important to note that the NGOs were pivotal in creating the curriculum at the beginning, supporting its implementation, and adapting it for an online environment during the pandemic. Parents are also positioned as important stakeholders, both providing ongoing input and engaging with the curriculum through their children. There's also structures for teachers to provide ongoing feedback. The 7 systems engaged in various social infrastructure building activities to support collective sense-making around the idea of holistic student development and what that meant for instruction. This helped them develop shared purpose, vision, and norms. Ireland's journey towards more holistic student development exemplifies the building of what social infrastructure might look like. Their system transformation efforts gathered momentum about a decade ago as they reconsidered their primary school curriculum. They shifted to outcomes-based specifications for both academic and holistic development, redesigned the curriculum to include more flexible and open-ended content, and included provisions for enhanced teacher and student agency. With the new curriculum framework, the teacher has been reimagined as a curriculum maker rather than a curriculum implementer, so a significantly different approach to what we see in Delhi. Curriculum redevelopment was a co-constructed process with heavy engagement from a wide range of stakeholders. The National Council for Curriculum and Assessment commissioned 14 research papers, some of which were discussed in forums with stakeholders to guide change processes. A series of NCCA-led consultations with students and parents and teachers have been instrumental in both shaping the curriculum framework at the outset and in providing feedback. Collective sense-making has been facilitated through a schools forum in which educators from 60 schools meet regularly throughout the year to discuss the successes and challenges they face in their contexts. The NCCA also established an international board of experts to advise the ministry on curriculum enactment. The 7 systems found different ways to balance common conventions with local discretion in promoting holistic student development. Although conventional strategies usually rely on getting school actors and other stakeholders to change behavior through an appeal to positional authority or through incentives and sanctions, a more discretion-centered approach involves developing a joint ownership of reform. An education system rebuilding underway in Chile provides an example of balancing common conventions with local discretion. Chile's journey towards holistic student development had a tipping point with the onset of the pandemic and the recognition of the dire effects on students and families. Chile's effort has centered on reconsidering its assessment and accountability framework. Specifically, the Education Quality Agency placed a moratorium on its high-stakes framework and implemented a newly created comprehensive learning diagnosis, the DIA assessment. The DIA is a voluntary assessment tool that's made available to all Chilean schools to provide timely information and guidance on students' academic and social-emotional development through the school year. It includes indicators of students' personal learning, community learning, and citizenship learning, as well as students' assessments of school support for their well-being. Chile relies chiefly on local discretion for schools to opt into using the new DIA, which is a shift from the past. Teachers voluntarily draw upon agency guidelines and webinars to address socio-emotional well-being in the classroom. Educators now have the discretion to make school-level changes based on student needs. The DIA has been widely embraced by teachers and leaders in schools and incorporated by the new Chilean government into a 4-year plan for advancing academic and socio-emotional learning post-COVID. Wrapping up, the cases profiled in our report fill out the middle space between educational policy and instructional practice by providing a practical framework detailing core elements of work integral to rebuilding systems. The systems we studied took different on-ramps and pathways to holistic student development, but what's common is the attention to the 3 interrelated and overlapping domains: managing environmental relationships, building an educational infrastructure that supports instruction, and integrating educational infrastructure into practice. Moreover, and importantly, in no case did the 7 systems put information technologies in the first position as the primary driver of educational transformation. Rather, each placed instruction, the collaborative work of students and teachers, in the first position, and each engaged deeply in the development of infrastructures and organizations to support holistic student development. Looking ahead, we must expand the scope of inquiry to include a broader array of system rebuilding efforts, especially in systems that are aiming to support holistic student development while also increasing basic access to schooling, including in developing countries. Our work also suggests a need for new types of collegial cross-national learning opportunities among system leaders so they can learn together about the work of rebuilding systems to sustain academic rigor and support holistic development. We also need to find ways to draw local education professionals, parents, community members, and especially students into global conversations that provide evidence of new possibilities, build upon their knowledge, and fuel their agency. Our aim is to cultivate mutual awareness, increase trust, and positive collaboration in collective efforts to build and rebuild education systems to support holistic student development. Thank you.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited, especially because I've heard the 2 speakers before me. I read their material, and honestly, at times I said, oh dear, we were thinking along the same pathway, kind of. I didn't read their study before we did our transformation, but clearly many of those ideas we developed organically in a totally different system. And I'd like to add that, so I'll take you through my paper now. This is the outline. I won't spend much time on it, and I won't spend time here either, but I wanted you to know that I come from Lagos, Nigeria. It's a subnational, so it's a state, and you can see there very clearly accounting for just 0.4% of the landmass of the country. Can you see the little red there? But accounting for 11% of the population of the country, which means that, honestly, I can't describe what the place is like. I'm sure it doesn't look like any of the systems you've been seeing. So I would really appreciate, when we break out, you tell me more things about what we can do. We have 18,000 private schools and 1,017 public schools. There are more children in private schools. This has grown. This has been an unbridled growth because, of course, people keep coming to Lagos every day, and I'll get to that eventually. I was going to show you the slides showing how Lagos has grown over the years. But let me start with our problems, the major challenges we're facing. There's a very high attrition rate. Because many of our students, even when they start school, they start to see a kind of hopelessness, and so they tend to go into informal training, learning to be a carpenter, learning to be a hairdresser, and many of them have to work, and these are all poverty-related issues, so we have a fairly high attrition rate. We thought we didn't have out-of-school children, but now we know that we have a significant out-of-school children population. But first of all, we have a high attrition rate. And so the educational system has to have relevance for them. Right now, it's not relevant. We have low numeracy and literacy skills. And I became a commissioner for education about 3.5 years ago. Before then, I was in private service, where I was a very severe critic of the government, which is a lesson for us all. You criticize when you get there. It's not that easy. So we had very low numeracy and literacy skills among the students. You had students getting to, spending 6 years in our system not being able to read, which is quite scandalous, I felt. We have a nationwide challenge with insecurity. Even as I'm sitting here, I'm on my phone trying to understand whether I should close schools or not. So again, that's another context. I may close schools in the next 1 hour. I'm sure none of you is facing that kind of situation. Maybe you can advise me on what to do. We have budgetary restrictions. Once the governor asked me, he calls me education. Education, what % of the budget would you want? I said 100%. And even the 100 will not solve all our problems, but I'll take 100. So he said, well, realistically, I'm going to give you 13% of the budget. So I have 13% of the budget, and it is the largest budget in Nigeria. In fact, my colleagues routinely make fun of me and say I should be in the same company as governors and not commissioners, because there are many states in the country whose budget is not that large either. So, but it's still not big enough, because there's just so much happening that we don't have control over. And so there's this limited access to public education. You saw the figures, 1,017. I'll tell you our main problem, apart from the fact that the high cost of building in Lagos is extremely waterlogged. The cost of building a school in Nigeria is equivalent of building like 3 schools in other places, because the foundation alone, by the time you put 100 of piles before you actually start building, you would have spent enough to build about 2 schools. So we have that problem. And then we have the problem of massive migration into town, so that there's no space anymore, and we have to build up. We just have no space to expand, which would at least take our minds to technology, I would think. I mentioned something about out-of-school children. Yeah, we do have significant out-of-school children now because of migration. People born in Lagos go to school. They may drop out, but they start school. But people from other parts of, and not just Nigeria, sub-Saharan Africa, flock into Lagos with no skills, and they don't send their children to school. So we are now having a significant out-of-school population. We can't even count how many, because UNESCO tells us that 86 people come to Lagos in an hour and do not leave. And because they do not leave, so let me give you an example. One of our schools had a total enrollment of 4,000 a couple of years ago, and that was in 2017. They have 10,000 today. So you have 10,000 children entering into one facility. You can imagine. Again, because education is no longer glamorous, there's a low quality, the quality of teacher training, the quality of teachers is really poor. The universities that have faculties of education, they take the lowest scoring students. The best scoring students go into medicine, engineering, and so on. People do not want to don't want to go into education. And we have situations where I had a student, when I was a principal, I had a young man work with me, and his father kept fighting me that, would you want your own child to be a teacher? So the profession has lost its luster. I'm a daughter of 2 teachers. I'm the daughter of a commissioner for education and the daughter of a principal. So to me, education is actually the most important job anybody can do. So I was amazed that people think it's a very low kind of thing indeed. I've told you about the high influx of immigrants, and then there's the overlapping roles of governments and agencies. What if I tell you that I'm the Commissioner for Education, I'm in charge of pre-tertiary education, but there's an agency under me that recruits teachers, trains them, and so on, but does not report to me? So well, because we are good friends, we talk. But if we were not good friends, they wouldn't know what we want. They would just do what they want, and we'll just do what we want. So all these, but for me, I'm the kind of person who thinks it's half a cup full, isn't it? I work with this gentleman who I'm showing you on the screen, who challenged me and said, look, Lagos is about the audacity to think, to imagine, and to make it happen. So I have a lot of his political will. But remember, we are a subnational, not national government. But even within that, we're able to do a lot of things. And that's why he set up what he called the themes agenda with the E, the first E there being education and technology, that the nexus between the two. Many of our problems can be solved by technology. But remember, we also have infrastructure challenges of data, availability of power, and of course, poverty, people who just cannot buy the systems. Of course, we were influenced by the SDG goals, SDG 4, quality education, which is always there at the back of our minds. Sorry, you can see my handwriting. I do that a lot, and it's a good thing they gave me a cutoff point, or the slide would have been totally different again. So I cut off that day, then I wrote something. So please try and ignore the handwriting. But we were able to do some things. With student enrollment, it keeps rising, especially in primary schools, where enrollment had gone down because people felt the quality of those small private schools was much better. So it's rising, which is good. Numeracy increasing at 3%, 3 times increase in rate of learning. Literacy, again, 40% growth in performance. We have our exams, the terminal exams after year 12, and when we came in, the pass rate was at 39. It's now around 80%. And we have other things. When we pitch ourselves against our mates in other states, best teachers, head teachers in Nigeria, first in all sorts of competitions. And we've got a lot of financial support from the private sector and development partners to the tune of over $11 million for now. And so why? What have we done? And this is one of our more interesting schools. The governor insists that we should build sports facilities. We don't have much land, but this is one of the places where we have land. Can you see Lagos from the air? This is one of our schools as well, tech-driven. We built it with containers. So the foundation was not as expensive as it usually is, and it's all tech, yeah, but still expensive. So how did we achieve this in 3 years? I mean, and these are those 2 papers. I now had to look at them and say, did we do anything? Did we match any of these? I think we did, and I say a big thank you to you. I read the paper, I enjoyed the papers, and I said, that means that we were thinking straight, right? Even in the midst of a lot of problems. And I know you know COVID struck, And for nearly 2 years, the country was almost comatose. And during this period, though, we were still able to teach and learn, mainly because we had this transformation plan at the back of our minds. They've talked about the two, but what I can say is the purpose. Let me look at the participatory approach. Purpose. Yes, we had to have a purpose, a shared vision, because we had this educational system. We were all concerned. Things are not going well. We have a huge social cohesion problem. We have children on the streets who can't read, who can't work. What do? We have to sit together, all of us, parents, teachers, and all. So we came together and designed a purpose. And it was more humanistic because we felt that. So that's where we took from both, right? Where we felt that children should learn. We were too focused on academics. When I was in school, and if I happened, because we used to have positions, if I happened to come second, I was really frightened to go home. Because my parents would say, what happened to the first? Does he have two heads? Why were you second? Then I said, but there were 30 people behind me. Eh? So what? What about that person who beat you? Does he have two heads? And, so we were all focused on education. And, we just had to broaden our vision. So you've seen these two, and I've tried to look at how we met the purposes of the two. So we had our purpose, we had our pedagogy, we had our methods of teaching, which were so old-fashioned, instructor-led. Teacher lectures in the classroom. To shift teachers from that perspective is something really difficult. Because they've been doing this for years. So you are trying to say what you've been doing for years is just not working. And that annoys people. Wouldn't it annoy you, So that took a lot of doing. And then, of course, we had to now align the system components and the pedagogy to make sense for every child in the system. And of course, the other schematic shows managing the environment. We were in a very strange environment where so many children out of school. Children going to school saw no reason to go to school. So we had to engage with parents, with the community, we had communities where you finished building a school and you left and you came back and everything had been stolen. So we had to tell communities, this is your school, these are your children, they belong to you, look after everything there. We had to do things like that. And of course, you had to build infrastructure, technical and everything, building schools and all, and integrate everything into our policies. I'm not sure we've been very good at that. Our shared vision was simple. We said this is what we want every child to be. I had my people talking, they said all sorts of things. You can see, out of the box thinking, passionate, God-fearing, loving. I said, this just doesn't happen because you wish it to happen. You have to develop a system. So I think this is where we started with a focus on what our vision was. Then we had our transformation plan. We had 15 elements, which was really too much. But reading through now, it was clear that we were spreading ourselves thin. And when COVID struck, we had to sit down and say, man, just focus on about 5. Don't try to kill yourselves. So some of the things that we did, introducing all sorts of initiatives to improve literacy and numeracy. I think I've talked about the results, and we did have additional funding for the schools, and we recruited teachers, about 9,000. The state hadn't recruited in about 14 years. And so teachers were retiring at the rate of like 1,000 per quarter, but we now were able to replace them, so we kept on recruiting. And we're able to, we reviewed our curriculum, optimized it. We had an SSA STEM who was actually working with Smithsonian here. So we had so many, I can't tell you how many partners we had. This is too short a period for me to let you know the intensity of what we had to do, the people we had to move with, the development partners, the NGOs, old students who are very passionate about their schools and willing to put something back, communities who wanted their schools to do well by the children. And so a lot of investment, a lot of efforts made. And during COVID was serious. But we were able to also get people to give us devices because our students couldn't afford devices. Got devices, got them to students in the most underserved, distant parts of the city. So the how of it all, I've said that a lot. Budgetary, political will, and so on. I went back to that. What would we have done differently? I think we should have devolved more leadership to the schools. There was a lot of top-level discussion, frankly. We should have included student voice in reforms. We didn't do enough of that. And as a principal, I was principal of like 3 or 4 schools, and I know how great the students usually are. We should have broadened our success metrics with so much emphasis on academics, passing exams, you know. And we should have focused on non-academic subjects, which we tried to do through what we call the comprehensive schools, setting up schools where we're teaching a variety of skills, but that's fledgling now. We should have strengthened monitoring and evaluation, paid special attention, because we have 1,700 schools. How could I get to 1,700 schools? So we needed to strengthen that. And we needed, like I said, to broaden dimensions into more holistic development, students' well-being. And there was not enough of that at all, be the first to say that. So a lot of lessons learned, and this is my last slide. We are going to work on private school regulation because they have more students than we do, and there are more of them. We're going to work with more school infrastructure, continue investing. We are not done with that at all. We haven't done enough with children with special needs. We haven't done enough with children living in extreme poverty, in distressed areas where there's huge climate change and therefore loss of, we have some villages in Lagos that are moving back every 5 years as the ocean takes away their waterfront, their homes, their farms, everything. So we haven't done enough with children who are not mainstream. And we've got to do something about that. We need to look at the out-of-school population because it's going to have severe implications for social cohesion in public, even right now and in future. And we need to broaden our curriculum. I've said that. And finally, I think we need to do a bit of expansion of our vocational training and stop thinking every child has to do physics, chemistry, for their maths. But why don't you do other things and make some money out of it? I mean, and students are seeing that. I have students now who are into barbing, who are into plumbing, carpentry, IT, developing IT solutions and so on. So I think, say thank you. That's my governor saying thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for delivering those wonderful keynote remarks, and to all of our other speakers this morning. We are going to be wrapping up soon the live stream session of this morning plenary. So thank you so much to everyone who's been joining us online. And we've been overwhelmed by the interest in this event. And so as everyone who is with us in person is quickly realizing, we have a very full house today. And so we have tried to squeeze as many of our colleagues as we possibly could into our facilities. And we ask for your understanding and patience as we all move throughout the building today. We'll have several breakout sessions in the morning and then again in the afternoon. And it's possible that because of the size of our group, your first choice session might fill up. And so we ask you to please proceed to another session. We will have Brookings staff, which as a reminder, we're all wearing these blue name tags, around to direct you to another room that has space. And we encourage you to share your learnings from those sessions in our large networking breakout sessions, our coffee breaks, and our lunch so that we can really collectively benefit as a group from all of our different breakouts. And with this, this now concludes the opening session of our day. And thanks to our colleagues online for joining us. And we look forward to reconvening the live stream portion of today in our plenary session, both for those online and in person at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will now transition into the World Cafe session.